I'm Nigel Farage, leader of Reform UK. Just before we came on air, we overtook the Conservatives in the national opinion polls. We are now the opposition to Labour.
I was born around the time that the NHS was founded. It was an amazing thing, but unfortunately, now it is on its knees. So many public services are not working as they used to. Do any of you have any ideas that are big enough to make things work again?
Nigel Farage.
Well, Dennis, the NHS has two fundamental problems. One, Penny mentioned, caseloads up by 43%. Why? Because we have an exploding population. All of our public services are under pressure because the population has increased by 6 million since the Conservatives came to power. It's impossible to keep up. Secondly, everyone talks about more money, more money. We've massively increased the amount we spend on the NHS. We've gone from spending about 7% of the national cake to over 11% of the national cake for worse and worse returns. And we need to look at countries like France, who spend exactly the same sum of money but get far better services by people paying in to an insurance fund. It acts on a mutual basis. Those that can't pay don't. They get better results. Let's think more broadly.
Thank you very much indeed.
Is the fact that it's not migration is the problem, it's the fact that we need more people coming in to work in our hospitals and to work in our social care sector, which has been decimated by your Brexit.
Isn't the point? All we want is for it to be free at the point of delivery. That's what matters. And actually, Labour are quite right to say, let's use the private sector to try and reduce some of the waiting lists. Why not actually give people tax relief on paying money into private insurance to relieve more of the pressure?
We want to make the economy fairer so that the billionaires and multi-millionaires, those with the broadest shoulders who can easily afford to, pay a bit extra to fund the public services that we all rely on.
They'll leave the country. They're leaving already. Even under a Conservative government, we've got a brain drain, the likes of which we haven't had since 1978.
Can I come back on that specifically?
And if Labour are in power, maybe with your support, what will happen is even more will leave. Just taxing the rich doesn't solve this. And everyone here is talking about more money, more investment.
I'm
telling you, we've massively increased investment in the NHS for a worse return. It's not just about money.
Carla Zania.
Which I did say about reform as well.
I'll introduce some facts to this debate. When the rules on non-dom status were changed in this country in 2017, there was no difference in who was leaving the country amongst those that were affected by that change and those who weren't.
Nonsense.
No, that's true.
They're leaving now.
Angela Rayner, you wanted to have honesty, and the taxation has to be fair in that the weight is borne by the shoulders of those who have the broadest shoulders, be it corporates or the very, very wealthy.
We have to spend money wisely. Just pump. Folks, I've explained to you, we've massively increased over the last few years the percentage of the national cake we put into the NHS for a worse return. Does nobody else acknowledge we need to spend the money better?
Be honest, do you think our education system is still world-class?
Scotland was world-class at one point. It certainly isn't now. It's gone right down the international rankings. Look, there is a problem. We know the buildings, the rack concrete, all of that, but we are back to the subject that nobody wants to discuss. The exploding population means our schools, our class sizes are getting bigger. Of course, we've recruited more teachers. We need more teachers with an exploding population. And it's a constant problem that none of the other panellists even want to discuss.
Angela Rayner, tell Nigel Farage about the policy that you have on finding new teachers.
Well, first of all, I respectfully disagree that we have the exploding population in our schools. We have falling roles in our schools at the moment, actually, and that is a problem for many of our primary schools. But what we've said is that we would end the VAT tax break on private schools to put 6,500 qualified teachers in the classroom. We've got teachers teaching lessons that they're not qualified in at the moment. We think that every child should have a qualified teacher in the classroom. And we had the Tories who knew and were warned about RAC and the problems with our schools' buildings at the moment. We've got more temporary classrooms because of that, because they did nothing, but they cut the capital budget for schools at the same time, knowing full well that there was dangers with RAC buildings.
OK, Nigel Farage and then Penny Mordaunt.
Look, you know, if you put 20% on private school fees, all you'll finish up with a lot more, probably 25% of those currently in private school will then be a burden for state schools. It is a self-defeating policy that removes parental choice.
OK.
Well, Nigel, those schools could...
OK, thank you.
Our state schools have had austerity and have cuts and cuts. Those schools could absorb some of those costs so they didn't have to pass it on to all of the people...
So you're happy with more pupils going into the state sector?
But we cannot afford to give private schools a tax break when our state system cannot have the right teachers in the classrooms that they deserve.
OK, must bring in Penny Mordaunt now.
In addition, in 2010... I keep hearing migration levels are too high and getting higher, and it's a strain on public services. But I understand we as a country need some foreign workers. What are you going to do?
Nigel Farage.
Well, it's funny Angela Rayner says that, because Labour today launched their 6 key priorities for the general election and didn't mention the single most important issue affecting the lives of everybody in this country, namely the population explosion caused directly by migration. The reason we voted Brexit and the reason Penny's party got the massive majority in 2019 is we voted to reduce the numbers coming in, and the numbers have exploded. I mean, honestly, unbelievable. 1 in 30 people walking on the street out there has come in the last 2 years alone. The answer is we have to have net migration at 0. It means skilled workers can come, we can go work abroad, we have to have a freeze on the total numbers of those coming in.
We think it's shameful when some politicians scapegoat the people who become our neighbours, our friends, our colleagues, to distract from their chronic underinvestment in public services. The solution isn't scapegoating or pulling up the drawbridge. The solution is investing in our communities to make sure everyone has access to the services they need. My party will never engage in that scapegoating rhetoric.
Thank you. There was some pretty strong language used towards Nigel Farage about dog whistle tours and scapegoat politics. What's your response to that?
I'm just
Nigel
talking
Farage?
numbers. We haven't even mentioned housing yet.
But could you respond to that point in
particular?
particular?
No, I ignore that nonsense. Complete nonsense. I'm just talking pure facts. Housing. We have to build 1 new home every 2 minutes just to cope with legal net migration under this Conservative government. It is literally impossible. And as for the numbers coming in, I would respond to this. 50% of the 750,000 who are coming in a year are dependents. They're not wealth creators. And mass migration is making us poorer. You'll hear, oh, GDP's going up. Well, of course it is. There are more people. GDP per capita, our relative wealth, has declined for the last 6 consecutive quarters.
I hear Nigel talking a lot about... I hear Nigel Farage talking a lot about dependence.
Facts.
The problem that we have in higher education now is that changes in visa requirements means that family members aren't able to come and study to accompany students to Welsh universities. That is causing major problems in terms of revenue for our higher education.
You shouldn't bring your mum. You come to university in Britain, you can't bring your mum, can you? I mean, come on.
Nigel Farage.
Christine, the answer to your question is, what are they going to do about it? Neither of them will do anything. These people have lied to us repeatedly, and Labour,
you made a career of doing that.
Repeatedly. I know. I've actually always told the truth. I've always told the truth. Always said what I've. And Labour, it's not even in your first 6 priorities for government. You haven't got the will to do anything about it. Nothing under these is going to change, and the vast majority. Not on this panel, obviously, because they're not representative in that sense. The vast majority of Britons want net migration reduced significantly.
I'd like to ask you all a pretty quick-fire question from Ken in Caerphilly. He told us that he had a simple question, yes or no. If elected, would you ever rejoin the EU or the single market? Nigel Farage.
No, we're free. Unfortunately, we're governed incompetently, but at least there are mistakes and not somebody else's.
Steve.
Britain is a rich country. I've worked in housing for 32 years. Why am I working every day with individuals and families who never thought they'd struggle, but now rely on food banks and are at serious risk of homelessness?
Thank you very much indeed, Janice. Nigel Farage.
Because people are getting poorer. It's quite simple. I mentioned a few moments ago that GDP, wealth per capita, has fallen for the last 6 consecutive quarters. And it's very much... And it's been the same. It sort of began with Labour, but it's continued. It's very much a country in which the big corporates and the big banks and a certain group of people have become richer exponentially and everybody else has fallen behind. And things that perhaps, you know, we could have expected when we were younger, our kids and grandkids now find a house unaffordable. Rents have risen by 20%, in some parts 30%, just in the last 3 years. And I'm sorry, but we are back to the population explosion and the massive impact it's having on the lives of people. And we've got to try to get the population to steady, and we have to build more houses, and we have to take the poorer people out of tax. Increase the tax
Thank you very much.
to £20,000, get people back to work.
Thank you very much. Nigel
We need to do something with vision. And if we increase the level at which people start to pay tax to £20,000, that takes 7 million people out of tax. That's up to a £1,500 benefit for people on lower wages. But it helps get people off the benefits trap. Because the benefits trap is if you start to go back to work and earn money, you lose benefits, plus we'd rely less on unskilled foreign labour. That's the kind of vision that we need to help those who are at the lower end of the income scale or on benefits in this country. And you know what? I really believe it would work.
Just a quick question, Nigel Farage, from Suella Braverman actually has talked about the two-child benefit cap, which has been raised, just touched on a couple of times. I know that at some point we'll return to that. Suella Braverman has actually said that that two-child benefit cap should be lifted. She's spoken quite warmly about you in recent times.
I know.
Well, I wasn't asking you to respond to that necessarily, Nigel Farage, but she would welcome a lifting of that cap. Would you agree with Suella?
I think we should encourage people to have families. I think we should encourage people to have children.
So is that, so they should all be, all of those children.
And I think we should also encourage people in marriage to have some tax benefits as well. I really do.
So that's a yes. A lifting of the two.
Yeah, we've got to help people.
OK.
My question is to Penny Mordaunt. Given that your 2010 manifesto, your 2015 manifesto, your 2017 manifesto said you'd reduce net migration to tens of thousands, your 2019 manifesto said immigration would massively reduce, and that net 4.3 million people have come into the country since that time, why on earth should anybody believe the fifth manifesto that promises cuts to net migration?
Because of the record of this Prime Minister. So we've had...
that's fine, I'm happy.
Figures out today that show that visa applications have fallen by 30%, and the OBR's own forecasts say that we will halve immigration by next summer. That's the trajectory we are on, and we will give Parliament the chance to set an annual cap on family and work visas. That will be enshrined a legal cap, and that is what we are offering. That's why you can have confidence that those numbers have come down. They're projected to come down. And the only alternative you have in this election is that, or what the Labour Party have on offer. Nigel is a Labour enabler.
Nigel,
and he is enabling no cap, no target and no plan.
Penny, let Nigel Farage come back.
I don't believe a single word that you say. You've deceived us with the last four manifestos. I don't believe you in the fifth. And as for being a Labour enabler, we are now ahead of you in the national polls.
OK, thank you.
A vote for you is actually now a vote for Labour.
Thank you very much, all of you, for the questions so far.
People have lost faith in politics. We feel disconnected from our representatives and sceptical that you will deliver on your promises. The public simply doesn't trust our system anymore. What one change can you make to restore trust in politics?
I do agree that the first past the post system has led to the two big parties. Well, one was big, not after today's polls, but there we are. They're both mushy sort of SDP parties in the middle. I would change the voting system. I think the House of Lords is an abomination. The fact that it's filled up with party donors is a complete disgrace. There must be an elected element. And finally, let's give the people the ability to call more referendums so they can decide the biggest issue of their lives.
Thank you very much indeed for that, Nigel Farage. I'll just bring Stephen Flynn in then as in response to some of the things you've heard on improving trust in politics and mending our broken politics.
Well, and I'm just surprised that Nigel Farage wants another referendum on Scottish independence. I'm sure there's a lot of folk back in Scotland who'd be...
Oh, come on, you don't want to lose again, do you?
Who'd be very keen to see that happen. Well, if you're so confident, if everyone else is so confident...
Unlike the rest, I don't need a script. I've come out of retirement, back into politics, with passion in my heart. And I'll tell you, Britain is broken, everyone knows it, and Britain needs reform. The election is over under our system. We know that Keir Starmer's going to win and probably have quite a big majority. The question is, who will lead the opposition? Because for democracy to work, there has to be a voice of opposition. And I put it to you that Ed Davey of the Liberal Democrats won't do that, because he actually agrees with Labour on most things. Rishi Sunak won't do it. Well, he'll probably be in California by then anyway. And the Tory party is split down the middle and about to implode in this election. I say to you, I will stand up against open borders. I will stand up and say those that come illegally across the Channel should be deported. I will stand up and fight for the millions of men and women running small businesses. I have the courage to take on the mob. Please join the revolt.